Well, we're back again with more Bloodborne board game content, and it is still the Forsaken Cainhurst Castle that we've got. We did the unboxing and Martyr Ligarius last time, so we're just going to get straight to it. Today is going to be the Lost Child of Antiquity, which is the little flasher guy here from the castle. Starting off again, same as last time, we've got clean water, we've got dirty water, we've got our kitchen roll, and we've got our wet palette that definitely does still need to be changed. It is pretty grim looking. Pop down the wet palette sheet, get out any wrinkles with a card, and we're ready to start painting. So yep, today is the Lost Child of Antiquity, and we're going to start off by priming him black. And same as Martyr Ligarius, we are going to do some zenithal highlighting. So to do so, we need our airbrush thinner and we need our airbrush cleaner. Pop some thinner in, pop some white ink into that, and we're ready to start highlighting. This is the format that I'm going to be doing for all of the models, so we're just going to be doing the same thing to get all of them prepped. Onto a little makeshift holder that I've made out of cork and blue tack, pop the model on and start spraying from a top-down angle, making sure that the higher points are the brightest, and then slowly falling off into darker shadows, and then we'll get a nice contrasted zenithal highlight, great for contrast paints to go on top of. Perfect, that's how he's looking. Pretty creepy. So let's begin. We're going to start off with some Skeleton Horde contrast paint, a nice light brown kind of contrast paint. Perfect when you thin it down and you can start working in darker colours on top of it. Again, with contrast paint, it works so nice with zenithal highlighting, which is the sort of rule of thumb that I go with these kinds of things. It makes the painting process so much quicker and so much easier. It's good for beginners as well. If you don't have an airbrush, you can always zenithal highlight with dry brushing. You can do it with prime spray cans as well. Just doing it with an airbrush is an easier way. You get more control over the strength of the spray. But again, you can achieve the same look with dry brushing as well. You don't need an airbrush. I just use one because I have one. For the main base kind of coat colour, I'm going to be mixing together some Rakarth Flesh and Mournfang Brown, and it will give us this kind of like nice dark pinky browny kind of tone, perfect for our shadow tone to go on top of the Skeleton Horde contrast base coat. Basically, I want to still keep it nice and thin so that I don't lose the shade underneath, but the Skeleton Horde contrast will give us a nice base colour for this to sit on, so that the thin base that I'm applying now still reacts quite nicely to it. It looks a bit more colourful as opposed to if I just painted on top of the zenithal highlight. And also it keeps track of, the light to dark contrast that's already applied via the priming, if that makes sense. On top of that, the next colour will be just some pure Rakarth Flesh, nice and thinned out, and I'll just slowly start applying this to brighter areas like the top of his bald head, on the sort of like upper raised parts of the muscles. Anywhere that's kind of like top down facing is where the brighter Rakarth Flesh colour will go. Keeping it nice and thin allows you to kind of blend it between the two tones. If you make it too thick, you're literally just going to paint too much over it and you're just going to undo the colour underneath, which will then require you to have to go back and forth adding different highlights and shadows, which, just adds time to the process. I'm guilty of doing that. I do that way too often, but I'm trying very hard to be disciplined with keeping it thin so that I create the nice gradient as I go. As you can see here, we're sort of getting that nice blend between the different colours. So then I can just add in some white into the Rakarth Flesh mix, and then same again, but just in more concentrated areas. I'm just bringing out those highlights on the muscles and higher parts, especially on the bald dome that he has, just to really bring out those bright points, and it gives us that nice contrast between light and dark, which is the main thing that creates interest on a miniature. The less contrast you have, the flatter it looks, the less interesting it looks, is basically my understanding of how to make things look more interesting. I'm just following suit, targeting all the areas that I think are brightest. Again, everything that's like top down, keeping the shadows underneath dark so that you really are seeing that big difference between the brightest bright points and the darkest dark points. See, the main thing that you will find is that if things aren't looking that interesting, it's because you need to make the brighter points brighter, you need to make the darker points darker. So what I'm doing is just, again, adding more white into the mix as I go, targeting small areas every single time within the highlighted areas, just to create that interest and dynamic contrast. And then it will get to a point where it pretty much is like almost pure white, which will be our brightest tone. As you can see here, I'm literally just targeting tiny points on the face, the top of the chrome dome, and tiny bright points of the muscles, which basically will be our brightest points. One thing that I do find with the Citadel paints is that their whites aren't the best. I haven't tried any of Vallejo whites yet. I'll be interested to see what people say about them. But I do find that the sort of viscosity of the white paints from Citadel aren't the best. So it does take me a fair few tries to be able to get whites correct using Citadel paints. But anyway, once I've done that, I'm going to go back over with a black wash and just start placing it into the real tucked in recesses of the model so that I get super duper uber dark strong contrast, and then just start blending that black wash in a bit so I don't get that sort of harsh line between the dark and the bright. And that will pretty much be the bulk of the painting done. I can then add some straight black onto the sort of horns, talons, I think if you want to call them, the sharp wingy bits at the end. And then take some storm vermin fur, which will be his beard and his sort of receding hairline at the back of his head. I don't know if it's receding, it's receded. Yep, that will be our sort of hair color. And I'll take some white into that as well to generate some highlights on it, add in the streaks onto different strands of hairs, take some black wash, mix it in, just so we get some contrast and interest on the hair so it's not just one color. Then my favorite thing in the world, coagulated blood. I'm just gonna use a crappy old brush and just start splatting it over him, making sure to get it mainly on the kitchen roll and not on the model, and then just go over it, dabbing on some coagulated blood, and then you can get a bloody, flashy, winged demon, perfect to scare the living shit out of you at the castle. Then I can just paint in some grey onto the stones. Once that's all done, you can just paint the base black and it's ready to go, really. That's kind of it. That's the Lost Child of Antiquity. And yet, that's a second model done. That is the Lost Child of Antiquity from the Cainhurst Castle expansion. If you did enjoy today's episode, please be sure to drop it a like. Like I said last week, I've got so many of these edited together and I'm literally just blitzing through voiceovering all of them as I go. They're going to be queued up to go out from between now and probably some way through January as well. So we got a lot coming out. If you want to support the channel in other ways as well, I do have a Patreon. So if you want to subscribe to that, we've got lots of cool stuff coming out over the next couple of months and beyond that as well. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So I want to thank you all for joining me once again. This is a second reminder to drop the video a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment if you so want to. And yeah, I will see you next time again for some even more Bloodborne stuff. Pip pip, cheerio.